The Radeon division cannot help themselves. Just as they were building the brand back up with the successful launch of the RX 9000 RDNA 4 GPUs, they've gone and pulled probably the most idiotic move of the year from any hardware company. They're effectively ending driver support for RDNA 1 and RDNA 2 graphics cards by no longer providing those models with game-specific optimizations. Given that you could purchase RDNA 2 GPUs brand new from retailers as recently as this year, 2025, this decision is disgraceful and completely unacceptable.
Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by WOLFBOX and their MegaFlow handheld turbofans. The MegaFlow 100 features a 150,000 RPM brushless motor that enables a wind speed of 45 meters per second and offers up to 100 minutes of runtime. This makes it ideal for heavy-duty tasks like cleaning your PC, while still being capable of easier jobs with variable speed control. There's also the MegaFlow 50, a more budget-friendly option that still packs impressive power with a 110,000 RPM motor, 3 speed settings, and up to 240 minutes of runtime. Both models come with a handful of attachments and are charged via USB Type-C for maximum convenience. So for more information, please check the link in the video description.
We first caught wind of this when viewing the driver notes for AMD's latest release, 25.10.2. Buried among many lines of information at the end of an important information section is this: new game support and expanded Vulkan extension support is available to Radeon RX 7000 and 9000 series graphics products. This was AMD effectively saying to RDNA 1 and 2 owners that their GPUs would no longer get new game support. AMD further confirmed this was the case to PC Games hardware, with a statement in German, translated to English, saying that RDNA 1 and 2 graphics cards will continue to receive driver updates for critical security and bug fixes. To focus on optimizing and delivering new and improved technologies for the latest GPUs, AMD Software Adrenalin Edition 25.10.2 is placing Radeon RX 5000 and RX 6000 series graphics cards, RDNA 1 and RDNA 2, into maintenance mode. Future driver updates with targeted game optimizations will focus on RDNA 3 and RDNA 4 GPUs. To achieve this, AMD have split their driver path in two. If you go to the AMD website and search for drivers and say you have an RDNA 3 or 4 GPU like an RX 9070 XT, you'll download the version of 25.10.2 that has RDNA 3 in the file name, coming in around 903 megabytes. If you say you have an RDNA 1 or 2 product like an RX 6600, it'll link you to the RDNA version of this driver, which has a different, slightly larger file size. And if you download the driver directly from the release notes website, you'll get a 1.6 gigabyte combined version that contains both of the aforementioned drivers. AMD's previous main driver release, 25.9.2, was a single file for all models slightly less than 900 megabytes in size, which of course contained game optimizations for all of the RDNA series. There are so many issues with this that it's hard to know where to begin, and really it's hard to fathom AMD have actually made this decision. Let's start with the affected GPUs themselves though. RDNA 2 GPUs, they're not that old. The first models hit the market in November of 2020 with the RX 6800 XT and RX 6800. But AMD continued to release brand new variants in the middle of 2022. That's when we received the refreshed 50XT range, including the RX 6750 XT, 6650 XT, and 6950 XT. But it goes further than that because, as far as I can tell, the actual last RDNA 2 desktop graphics card was released on October 18th, 2023, just 2 years ago. This is when AMD launched the RX 6750 GRE for the Chinese market. Ending game optimization support for products launched at the end of 2020 is pretty silly. Those cards might be 5 years old, but are still capable in today's games. Ending support for products officially launched just 2 years ago is a crazy decision. Absolutely crazy, but it doesn't stop there. While AMD might have officially launched the last RDNA 2 GPU in 2023, you could actually still buy RDNA 2 products as recently as this year, or even literally right now. Some major retailers like Memory C still have the RX 6600 in stock to purchase today. PC Case Gear is still selling the RX 6500 XT, and while that GPU sucks, it's an RDNA 2 product you can purchase today that will be unsupported in the latest games the instant you purchase it. And it's not like the RX 6000 series has been an unreasonable purchase at times in 2025. If you were after an entry-level graphics card at the start of 2025, the RX 6600 was listed at retailers like Newegg for just $200 US in January of this year, just 9 months before AMD would stop providing game optimizations for this product. And at the time, it was basically still the best low-cost GPU you could purchase brand new. With RDNA 2 graphics cards being relatively recent, they are still capable of playing today's games, which makes the decision even more bewildering. It does make sense for GPU makers to eventually end support for cards that simply aren't capable of playing the latest games, but this absolutely does not apply to RDNA 2 models. The RX 6800 XT and above are typically faster than AMD's current generation RX 9060 XT, as you would have seen in our latest Battlefield 6 benchmark video. There is still plenty of life left in those products. The 6700 XT with 12GB of VRAM is also still extremely capable and is in the ballpark of today's mainstream GPUs, competing with the Intel Arc B580 in the latest titles. The RX 6600, it isn't the fastest GPU going around, but even in a title like Battlefield 6, it can play the game at 1080p 60fps using medium to high settings. It's about 25% slower than the slowest current generation model, the GeForce RTX 5050, but again, that is still enough performance for some new releases, especially at modest 1080p settings. It's a disgraceful and unacceptable decision to end support for graphics cards that still have the hardware capabilities to play modern games, and was still being sold as recently as this year. There is no technical reason for this. They wouldn't be trying to get a super slow, super old graphics card with not enough resources to play impossibly challenging titles. Even in poorly optimized releases from 2025 like Borderlands 4, the RX 6950 XT offers 60fps on average at native 1440p using medium settings. That is one of many products AMD no longer wants to optimize games for. Not only this, but one of the main advantages AMD had during the RX 6000 generation was its VRAM capacity, a future-looking feature that benefits customers years after release. One example of this during the RDNA 2 era was the RX 6800 offering 16GB of VRAM compared to the RTX 3070 offering 8GB of VRAM. The 6800 having double the VRAM is not really an advantage in the long term if by the time this advantage plays out, leading to the 6800 smoking the 3070 in modern titles because it has enough VRAM, AMD pulls the plug on driver optimizations. This sort of situation makes it much harder to see a higher Radeon VRAM capacity as an advantage or selling point because driver support could end much sooner than it should. From a competitive standpoint, this is a move that instantly makes AMD's direct competitor look amazing. Nvidia currently support and provide game optimizations for graphics cards as far back as Turing, the RTX 20 series originally released at the end of 2018. That's a minimum of 7 years of driver support, and I would expect these products to continue to receive updates given Nvidia only just now ended support for Pascal GeForce 10 series models this month. That's around 9 years of driver support for Pascal models, or about 7 total years from the release of the last main Pascal era graphics cards. In some cases, this is more than double the length of support AMD have offered RDNA 2 buyers. Now, some people argue that Nvidia focuses most of their efforts optimizing the latest games for the latest architectures, and that game-ready support for the oldest architectures like Turing is either not really occurring or is a low priority. We don't know whether that's true, but Nvidia do claim their game-ready drivers provide fixes for all supported models. When Nvidia announced a few months ago that Pascal and Maxwell GPUs would no longer receive game-ready drivers after October 2025, they said these architectures will transition to quarterly security updates for a further 3 years. This is a very similar situation to what AMD is doing much sooner for RDNA 1 and RDNA 2 architectures, where drivers still will be available, they just won't have the latest game optimizations. Why AMD would want to give their competitor such a massive advantage in driver support is beyond me. For years, AMD have struggled to improve the reputation of their drivers, especially among the less enthusiast PC buyers. Nvidia's supposedly quote-unquote superior drivers have been a reason to avoid AMD Radeon GPUs. We've heard this many times, that AMD drivers suck, and usually that's not aligned with the facts or our experience. Except now there is a legitimate factual thing people can point to. Nvidia supports their GeForce GPUs for far longer than AMD supports Radeon GPUs, which is a real and tangible driver advantage that Nvidia gives to their customers. The whole situation is a kick in the teeth to AMD's loyal customers who invested into the Radeon brand during a period they were struggling with and even losing market share. Just a couple of years after people bought RDNA 1 and 2 graphics cards, in some cases spending big to secure these models during a period of crazy GPU prices a couple of years ago, AMD are now throwing these customers into the trash. This move is a clear signal AMD doesn't care about providing good after-purchase support. And it hurts the trust a potential Radeon customer might have in their purchase. If I buy an RDNA 4 graphics card right now, how many years of game optimizations am I going to receive? Previously, I would have expected at least 6 to 8 years, but now AMD is signaling they may cut support as soon as 5 years from the initial release and potentially sooner than that, even while these models are still being sold. With an unclear timeline on driver support, why would I want to invest in a Radeon GPU when Nvidia has an excellent history of supporting GPUs for a much longer period of time? I would have thought that AMD would want to do the most they can to support customers who are loyal to the brand during their lowest moments, build up a community of fans and loyal buyers who want to choose Radeon the next time they buy a GPU because they felt supported and looked after during ownership of their current GPU. But no, AMD are leaving those fans in the dirt, and I wouldn't be surprised if a portion of them choose GeForce for their next GPU purchase. On top of this, buyers investing into Radeon have been hurt from a monetary standpoint. People currently using RX 6000 GPUs will not receive proper driver updates, and neither will anyone purchasing these cards on the used market when it's time to upgrade. That significantly erodes the value of the GPU, which again, many people are still using because they are perfectly capable of playing today's games. And when it comes time to sell, you're going to get a lot less back on the second-hand market. If you consider this as part of your purchasing decision, the sorts of value you might get back selling the card later, this again makes Nvidia a more attractive option because their cards, their old cards on the used market, are much more likely to be supported. The other angle we haven't really explored yet is that RDNA 2 is an architecture used across many of AMD's APU products, loads of which are still technically current generation parts being sold today. One major example of this is the custom Zen 2/RDNA 2 APU being used in the Steam Deck, a current generation device you can purchase today. Are AMD throwing those customers in the trash as well by not optimizing the latest games for RDNA 2? AMD just recently rebranded a bunch of current gen RDNA 2 APUs as well into the Ryzen 100 and Ryzen 10 series. Ryzen 100 APUs use the Rembrandt die, which combines Zen 3 plus CPU cores and RDNA 2 graphics, while Ryzen 10 APUs also use RDNA 2 graphics but with Zen 2 cores. These are effectively brand new models with a 2025 launch date using a graphics architecture AMD has just stopped optimizing games for. We asked AMD for further clarification on what happens to these APUs after this change, but are yet to hear back. For what it's worth, if you tell the AMD driver website you have an RDNA 2 mobile APU, like the Ryzen 7 7735HS, now rebranded and relaunched as the Ryzen 7 170, you will get a link to download the RDNA driver branch without the latest game optimizations. Ultimately, AMD ending support for RDNA 1 and especially RDNA 2 graphics cards so soon after launch is completely unacceptable. Steve and I are very pissed off at this situation. It's a disgrace that hurts you, the consumer, for no valid technical reason. It has widespread implications across AMD's product line, including for currently sold or current generation products, and the decision needs to be reversed immediately. From a review standpoint, we are less likely to recommend Radeon GPUs if AMD cannot guarantee driver support beyond just a few years of life. The standard length of time for driver support and the minimum we think is acceptable is at least 7 years of game optimizations. This is at least the length of time Nvidia provides driver support, and it aligns with the length of a given console generation. Of course, the PS5 was launched in 2020 and it is still supported today and will be for years to come. When you end driver support, it has to be long enough away from the launch that the vast majority of reasonable customers would have upgraded away from the generation that's set to become unsupported. It also shows that the bad old days of the Radeon division making dumb decisions are still very much here. This has been a constant issue we have brought up for years. AMD's Radeon team makes terrible decisions over and over and over again. This is one of their worst. So anyway, that's it for this video really. Just a bit of a frustrating one to make, frustrating to see this news evolve over the last day or so. We're going to be keeping track on this one, seeing exactly what happens, whether AMD reverses their decision or whether we can get a bit more clarity on the current situation. But for now, we're not happy. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. If you want to support Hardware Unboxed, we have Patreon. Links to that is in the description below. You can sign up and get access to things like our monthly live streams, BTS content, and Discord chat. Outside of that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.